Irish Guy, and what was your rock bottom moment in life? I mean, mine was probably waking up on Christmas Day to find Santa Claus passed out in a pool of the dog's vomit. But lads, today I'm going to take a look at every Premier League club and find each team's most painful, embarrassing lowest point of the 22-23 season. Right, let's go. Arsenal 4-1 versus Man City. Let's be honest, there haven't been too many moments this season where Arsenal fans have felt like biting off their own feet. It's mostly been a pretty smooth 9 months, which is more than I can say for my mum's pregnancy. She said that carrying me for 9 months turned out to be about as pointless a chore as carrying a TV up Mount Everest. But listen, rock bottom moments. Tripping up at Goodison Park would have been a big blow, as was chucking away 2-goal leads in successive matches, as was finding themselves 3-1 down at home to the division's bottom club. But traveling to the Etihad and needing to win, the fans were trying to stomach some self-belief. Those supporters probably spent the previous 48 hours trying to psych themselves up by watching Braveheart and screaming at women in the gym. But no, this was a limp, frail showing. They were outclassed, losing by 4-1. Poor old Rob Holding. I know he got on the score sheet, but considering that he has paid thousands of pounds for a hair transplant, clearly he's a little insecure. So can you imagine after an evening of trying to handle Erling Haaland? It was the equivalent of that bloke off Malcolm in the Middle trying to rugby tackle the Hulk. This was the end of the club's title dream. Surely this is the most painful one, because the reality just showed the gulfing class between the two clubs. Honestly, this was such a sobering moment for the Arsenal fans. It was probably like when Buzz Lightyear realised he couldn't fly. Aston Villa 2-1 versus Stevenage. You know what? I considered chucking in Steven Gerrard's last game, a 3-0 defeat at Fulham in October, where everyone just sort of sobered up and accepted that actually this ex-Rangers hero is actually about as much a Premier League coach as a cross-dressing Bugs Bunny. But lads, Unai Emery has turned out to be the perfect appointment. Yes, but don't you tell me that Villa fans weren't absolutely gutted on January the 8th. These fans are starved of silverware, and here they were appointing a trophy addict to a serial winner, and yet in the third round of the FA Cup they're winning 1-0 against Stevenage at home, and then Leander the Donker gets sent off after 85 minutes, and League 2 Stevenage scored twice, and I'm guessing the Aston Villa fans probably had to avoid their Birmingham City mates for a week. Imagine being the Donker and trying to sleep after that. No, he's probably up all night watching Bridget Jones and shoving ice cream in his mouth. Bournemouth 9-0 versus Liverpool. 9-0. 9. Anyone who loses 9-0 in a season, that is their rock bottom. And for Bournemouth, it came just 4 games into the season at Anfield. Do you know how bad this was? It wasn't just the fact that those travelling fans had to see poor Mark Travers pick the ball out of his own net 9 times. It was the fact that this was now 3 Premier League games in a row where Bournemouth had scored 0 and conceded 16. Scott Parker even cost himself his own job by basically going into the media and complaining that his squad were basically about as talented as anything off OnlyFans. It was this moment where the Bournemouth fans probably thought that they're going to be the next Derby County, that they'd be watching their team lose 6-0 every week and would be lucky to scrape 12 points all season long. It was because this result came so early into the season. I mean, a bit like going on a date and accidentally insulting her mum before you've even ordered the drinks. Yeah, it's going to be a long night. Brentford losing to Gillingham. Listen, Brentford have had a couple of wobbles, a couple of heavy defeats. What I mean, rock bottom moment? These fans have been flying high all season. Do you reckon that they were really bothered to ship 5 at Newcastle or 4 at Villa Park? I mean, it's not ideal. In that moment, the away fans probably sat in their seats, texting their mum for help whilst inhaling a pie. But really, they can't have been that depressed. But the one game where the fans were probably rightly furious was in the third round of the League Cup. Ivan Toney sticks them 1-0 up against Gillingham after just 3 minutes. I mean, considering just weeks earlier those same fans had seen their side score 4 1/2 against Manchester United, they were probably expecting a 6-0 thumping of these League 2 peasants. No, within 2 hours, they'd lost the tie on penalties after 81% possession and 16 shots compared to Gillingham's 1. Sounds like Mike Ashley going drinking with a nun. Don't think for 1 minute that those Brentford fans won't have kicked some bins on the way home from the match. Brighton 5-1 versus Everton. Again, because Brighton have been flying high like a seagull on steroids, these fans won't really have been that devastated at any point this season. But I'm sorry, in the last month, Brighton have competed in an FA Cup semi-final, won away at Chelsea, scored 6 against Wolves, beat Manchester United at home. Expectations would have been through the roof. After watching their team show Wolves such a little mercy, yet swear they had Liam Neeson at the wheel, surely those fans would have piled into this ground to see them absolutely savage through Everton. And yet, they instead lose 5-1? at home to a woeful side coached by Sean Dyche. If I was a Brighton fan, I'd be half tempted to ask for my money back. Watching Jason Steele show the flexibility of a blind teddy bear, seeing this proud Brighton defence struggling to cope with Dwight McNeil. Honestly, they made this former Burnley sludge pipe look like prime Frank Ribéry. Honestly, lads, without a doubt, this was a hideous Brighton afternoon. Chelsea 3-1 versus Arsenal. This has been the worst season in Chelsea memory. But do you know what's strange? They haven't actually been thrashed in that many games at all. Somehow, this hideous Chelsea team, aside of expensive egos, but with the collective backbone of a Galaxy Caramel, they've only conceded 4 goals in one league game this season, against Brighton back in October. I'm tempted to pick this result. I mean, how humiliating was it to see Graham Potter get absolutely outwitted by Brighton just weeks after walking out on them? But no, I'm actually going to go with their spineless 3-1 loss against Arsenal last week. Yes, 0 points was expected, but lads, Gary Neville called it the worst Chelsea performance of all time. They were 3-0 down after 34 minutes. It meant that was 4 defeats in a row, no wins in 9. I mean, when they lost to Brighton, it was bad, sure, but rock bottom? No. It was only their first defeat in 10. The previous week, they'd been seconds away from beating Man United. Things weren't that bad. Chelsea fans could sweep the Brighton loss under the rug and pretend it was a freak result. But this, the reality of being humiliated at the Emirates. If the Gunners hadn't eased off in that second half, this match could have been 6-0. That was their rock bottom. Crystal Palace 3-0 versus Fulham. A rock bottom moment for Crystal Palace. I'm tempted to pick that 4-1 loss at the Emirates because it meant that was now 12 games in a row where Palace had failed to win. But is it really a rock bottom moment, losing to the team top of the league? I actually think St. Stephen's Day was worse. Oh, what? You want me to say Boxing Day? Oh, why don't I also start buttering a scone, pop on Bridget Jones, and start kissing photos of the king? No thanks. Well lads, 26th of December. Palace's first game back since the World Cup restart, and it was a mess. Palace fans will be looking forward to this match with Fulham. It was the first time they'd seen their team in over 6 weeks. They could finally relax and toast a relaxing Christmas with a return to Sellers Park for a London derby. Yeah, no, those fans probably wish they just stayed at home, playing Crash Bandicoot with their kids, whilst their wife shouts drunken obscenities at the Gavin and Stacey Christmas special. This was a 3-0 defeat at home, where Palace had 2 men sent off. Fulham had 23 shots on goal. 11 were on target. Palace had none, and 1 corner compared to 8. Those stats, that's like playing a match of FIFA against your mum. As far as Christmas presents go, the Palace fans would have probably preferred Patrick Vieira turning up at their house and getting his dog to slobber all over your turkey. Everton 3-0 versus Bournemouth. Where do you want to start with Everton? There have been so many rock bottom lows. How about a 4-1 defeat at home to Newcastle in April, where the fans pretty much accepted that they were going down? That's a very high contender, but I'm gonna go for the club's last game before the World Cup. Alright, Frank Lampard had just seen his Toffees team meekly surrender to a 4-1 loss at Bournemouth in the League Cup. Embarrassing, yes, but the good news is they were now back at the same ground for a Premier League rematch just 4 days later. Surely this is the chance to put things right and restore some dignity. Nah, they instead lose by 3 goals again. Let me get this straight. In the space of half a week, those Everton travelling supporters would have had to make the 9-hour round trip to Bournemouth twice, only to see their team ship 7 to a side coached by Gary O'Neill. And this was their lasting memory of Everton until Christmas. I mean, it's been like an army soldier leaving his wife for 6 weeks. But I mean, instead of taking her out for a nice romantic meal on the town before he goes, he instead just leaves a giant poo in her bed. Fulham 3-1 versus Man United. Fulham have been flying this year, but I don't really think too many fans have been reading too much into any dodgy defeats. But the biggest, most painful loss, throwing away an FA Cup quarter-final at Old Trafford. That must have stung. Alexander Mitrovic put them 1-0 up in the second half. They were 20 minutes away from a win, and then they implode. Mitrovic, Willian, and Marco Silva all get sent off inside a minute, and Man United score 3 times against a team with 9 men and no manager. Leeds 6-1 versus Liverpool. There have been so many awful results for Leeds. I mean, throwing the games away against Fulham and Tottenham were bad, but this result was awful. Leeds had just lost 5-1 at home to relegation rivals Crystal Palace. That was spineless. That was hopeless. Javi Garcia looked like someone with the footballing IQ of Wayne and Smithers. Surely there would be a response in the next match. When Liverpool visited Ellen Road under the lights, surely they would channel the spirit of Mark Viduka, Joseph Bottle, fight, anything. Nah, instead, 6-1 defeat. This meant that Leeds United under Garcia had conceded 11 goals in 2 consecutive games. 11. No wonder Garcia was soon banished from the ground. Leicester 5-3 versus Fulham. This has to be the rock bottom moment. Surely, Leicester City will always be their team who, even when they're in relegation battles, they show spirit, fight, desire. I mean, when they got relegated in 2004, they fought to the end. Christ, well, they nearly beat the Invincibles on the final day. This is a club who pulled off the great escape in 2015. But here, traveling to a Fulham team who were on the beach and shipping 5, an actual 5 goals, this was probably the moment where Leicester City fans accepted that, oh, they're going down. Not a single Leicester fan will have left London feeling anything other than absolute dread in their stomach, as if they were invited to go on a picnic with Jamie Vardy's wife Just awful. Liverpool 5-2 versus Real Madrid. Lads, there's been some contenders for Liverpool's worst moment of the season. A defeat away at Bournemouth was pretty rubbish, but I'm sorry, since when are Liverpool ever embarrassed on a European night at Anfield? For their tie against Real Madrid to already be over after the first leg, it was Jurgen Klopp's worst and most embarrassing day in the job, surely. Because Liverpool were 2-0 up after 14 minutes. They were destroying Real. This was their revenge mission against the club who broke their hearts so many times. So to somehow go from being 2-0 up to 5-2 down, Anfield is supposed to be a fortress on a European night. And yet Real made this stadium look about as intimidating as Disney on Ice. And yeah, unless Goofy tries to touch your bum by the side of the rink, you have nothing really to fear. Man City 2-1 versus Man United. Man City don't have rock bottom moments. They just don't. Not when they're going for a treble. Losing at home to Brentford in November was a bad hiccup. Absolutely. As was crashing out of the League Cup to Southampton. But I think the most painful moment for City fans was losing the Manchester derby. Jack Grealish had literally put them 1-0 up after an hour at Old Trafford. Surely they could just see the game out and win. But no, Bruno Fernandes equalises, and then Marcus Rashford scores a goal, which should have been ruled out for offside. So not only were the City fans obviously gutted to lose the match, but they probably felt such a sick injustice in their lungs. They probably all developed such a quick and instant hatred towards the ref. The hardcore nutjobs probably started sending nasty emails to his mum. Man United 7-0 versus Liverpool. Forget this season. This is the biggest rock bottom moment I have ever seen Manchester United sink to. And I've seen them have some horrible lows. Crashing out of the Champions League group stage under Sir Alex Ferguson, shipping 4 MK Dons, losing a City derby by 6-1. But this is hands down the worst one. It is a horrible stain on the club's history, and the responsibility is on Erik ten Hag. Up until that point, this guy was being hailed as a tactical revolutionary, a saviour from Holland. But I'm sorry, in that second half at Anfield, he just looked like Humpty Dumpty on a diet. Forget about how well Man United have done this season. Losing 7-0 at Anfield could never be undone. And the fact that it was literally 0-0 just 3 minutes before half time, it was a bigger collapse than Will Smith's career. When 3 different Liverpool players are helping themselves to a brace past David De Gea, you know something's gone horribly wrong. Newcastle 2-0 versus Man United. Look, a 3-0 defeat at Villa Park was Newcastle's worst performance of the season. An FA Cup exit at Sheffield Wednesday was the club's worst result of the season. But losing the League Cup final to Manchester United would have hurt the most. Those Geordies making the trip to Wembley, and they'd be given such a meek, timid performance against a beatable team. Lads, Newcastle absolutely vanquished Man United at St James's Park just 6 weeks later. But here, it was such a tame display. And actually, this was a pattern of stiff results for Newcastle in 2023. Because in the league, Newcastle had only won 1 of their previous 7 games. And even that was only in the last minute. They'd only scored twice in those 7 games. So here, Newcastle fans probably thought after this Limp Cup final that naturally their season would just fall away into dust, and they finished about 7th. Nottingham Forest 4-0 versus Leicester. There have been a lot of bad moments for Nottingham Forest this season, but I'm going to go for the 3rd of October when they lost 4-0 at Leicester. I mean, their previous 2 matches, they lost 3-2 at home to the only 2 other teams who were with them in the championship the previous year. Before that was a 6-0 defeat at the Etihad. So honestly, this 4-0 loss at the King Power Stadium made this entire Forest squad look like a doomed mess. It made Steve Cooper look like he was about as clued into Premier League football as a brain-dead cat. This was the result where everybody wrote them off as relegation fodder. Nobody gave Forest a hope after this, especially considering Leicester City were themselves off the back of 6 defeats in a row. They had just conceded 11 goals in 2 consecutive games. This was a battle between the 2 bottom clubs, and yet this result meant that Leicester leapfrogged Forest to put them 20th after 8 games, and with a goal difference of -15. How did Cooper survive? Southampton losing versus Grimsby Town. I mean, the moment relegation is confirmed, that'll be Southampton's worst moment of the season, but for now, surely losing at home to Grimsby Town in the FA Cup. Gavin Houlihan scored 2 penalties. Some bloke from Kilkenny, who 5 years ago was playing for Galway. He doesn't even have an Irish underage cap to his name. I don't even know who he is. And weirdly, he spells his name Gavin with 2 A's. And Southampton lost to that. Christ, well, that really was the moment where everyone realised that Nathan Jones was about as clever as Pikachu. Tottenham 6-1 versus Newcastle. If you asked me last year to just pick Tottenham's biggest ever rock bottom moment that I've ever seen, I'd have said losing 5-1 to already relegated Newcastle on the final day to Bottle finishing above Arsenal in 2016. Yeah, they've outdone themselves here. In a battle for the Champions League places, they find themselves 5-0 down after 21 minutes. They wind up losing 6-1, have to sack their interim coach, and pretty much accept there'll be no Champions League next season. 5-0 down after 20 minutes. Again, that was a horrible permanent stain on the club's history. Embarrassing. West Ham 5-1 versus Newcastle. Again, another trouncing by Newcastle in the spring. There have been loads of horrible low points for West Ham this season, but I think being outclassed by the Geordies at home in April, this was single-handedly the worst defensive showing I have ever seen from a Hammers team. And lads, I remember them losing 6-0 to Reading. This was as bad as it gets. And considering they were only separated from the relegation zone on goal difference with 10 games left, West Ham fans were probably already preparing for 2024 trips to Plymouth. Wolves 6-0 versus Brighton. Well, it's pretty simple. Julian Lopetegui is an ex-Spain and Real Madrid coach. With him at the wheel, these results aren't supposed to happen. Travelling to the Brighton beach and conceding 6 without reply, making Danny Welbeck look like prime Samuel Eto'o. Pretty horrible. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Let me know what was your rock bottom moment. Let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe, and as always, I'll talk to you in a while.